Good afternoon, everyone. We welcome you to this webinar today, and thank you for joining us. Today's webinar will focus on the use of mobile money for humanitarian cash programming in the Ethiopian context. This webinar has been a joint collaboration or a result of a partnership between the currently ongoing ECHO-CCD or Collaborative Cash Delivery in Ethiopia and GSMA Mobile for Humanitarian Innovation program. We have a very exciting line of speakers today. Majority of them directly from the field and in the fintech or mobile money sector, and they have quite a good set of presentations to share with us today, and we look forward for a much more engaged and a very collaborative session today. Some house rules. Please, when you join the call or during the presentation, please keep your videos and microphones so that we can avoid interference of microphones. And secondly, for all of those of you who are presenting today, please only switch your video and microphone on during your presentations. You don't need to worry about your slide deck. My colleague Alice will be supporting us with driving the slide decks behind the scenes. We will hold on every question because we have enough time at the end of the webinar to go through each and every Q&A. However, what we ask you to do, if possible, please do put your questions in the chat box, and we will go through them after the webinar. When you put your question down, please write your name and organization, and also critically, because we have a number of presenters, put down to which presenters you're addressing your question, so that when the question is asked, you can get directly tangible reply from the person who made the presentation. Without any further ado, I'm going to be inviting my colleague Josie Scott, who's currently the collaboration manager for the Ethiopia Collaboration Cash Delivery. She'll give us a high-level overview of this consortium and how we've been working in partnership with them on this current ongoing project. So Josie, please, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Isaac, for the introduction. So as Isaac mentioned, I just wanted to briefly introduce the CCD and our partnership with GSMA, really for sort of context for the meat of the discussion, which will focus on the sort of subsequent presentations. So as Isaac mentioned, I'm the collaboration manager for the Ethiopia CCD. And firstly, just to go into a bit of an overview of what the CCD is and what that means for the Ethiopia context. So the Collaborative Cash Delivery Network was formed in 2016 with 15 NGOs coming together at a global level to collaborate with this sort of shared purpose and goal of improving humanitarian cash programming. In Ethiopia, the CCD was formed in 2018 with funding from ECHO, where we formed a consortium and also the sort of national level network, which I'll speak about a little bit more. And our vision, as you see there on the screen, is a shared vision across all of our members to harmonise cash delivery for increased scale, effectiveness, efficiency, and collective impact. So I'll talk a little bit more about what that means and how we work to do it. But as you can see, I just wanted to give a quick shot of our members. So we currently have 12 INGOs in the Ethiopia CCD who are all committed to collaborating to improve the humanitarian cash in Ethiopia and really with nationwide coverage. And that's something that we're really proud of because it means we're able to reach people that are otherwise really difficult to reach, but also utilize our respective strengths, whether that's geographical coverage or technical strength in a particular area. And we're currently, I think, collectively programming and reaching about 80,000 households, although that figure might be a bit out of date. So if I dive into a little bit more about how we work to achieve our vision. Great. So there's three main areas, and the first is operational collaboration and cash delivery. So this is the ECHO consortium that we formed back in 2018, where we are testing a different approach to forming that consortium, and we've assigned different roles across the cash value chain and are delivering cash in Wallagas and Somali region. And that's been a really interesting sort of learning as well, but we're also testing out or investigating other sort of operational ways to collaborate. The second area in which we work together is creating an enabling environment. So I think one of the biggest learnings from the CCD globally is that collaboration doesn't just happen. You need to have at least one person sort of really driving it forward, but also things like governance frameworks, data sharing, you know, the processes and agreements that make it happen. And then thirdly is looking at national level systems change and driving sort of collaborative initiatives and innovation. So this is looking at things like mobile money or linking sort of increasing gender mainstreaming, so areas in which all of our members say we'd like to see progress on this, but as an individual organisation we're struggling. So, you know, you see the leverage or the collective impact of us coming together there. And really to sort of summarize or to build on what Isaac has already said about the partnership that we have with GSMA, obviously this partnership is supporting the ECHO consortium very practically, but also is supporting all 14 members in understanding mobile money and feeling more comfortable, confident and able, you know, to use mobile money. And I think, you know, the partnership between the Ethiopia CCD and GSMA was formed a year ago now. And I don't think any of us could have imagined it being such a well-timed partnership, particularly with this presentation, you know, with the changes in the legislation in Ethiopia, but also with COVID-19 really driving that push for mobile money and digital transfer mechanisms. So I'm really, really excited. I've spoken to a few of our Ethiopia CCD colleagues who are also equally excited to hear the presentations and also get involved in the discussion towards the end of the project or the end of the webinar. And yeah, I'm sure it's going to be really interesting and helpful. And that's all I'll say. I'll hand over to our next speaker. But thank you to all our speakers and attendees.
Great, thanks, Josie. Before the next speakers come on, one thing I forgot to mention when I was doing the house rule for speakers, please, I have not given introduction of who you are and what you do. So before you start the presentation, please introduce yourself and who you are and what you do. So Belinda, over to you.
Thank you, Isaac. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Belinda Barr, and I work as an Insights Manager in the Mobile for Humanitarian Innovation team with Isaac. So I'm going to just give a very quick overview of the highlights of M4H's report, Partnering During Crisis, the shared value of partnerships between mobile network operators and humanitarian organisations. Next slide, please. Great, so to start, I'll just give a bit of a background to the report. Next slide, please. This report was produced to lend support to the critical need to move away from the supplier-client relationship that is often seen between humanitarian organisations and the private sector, including mobile network operators. The report provides the M&O perspective of engagement with humanitarian organisations and digs into what is needed for successful, impactful partnerships. So to inform this report, we conducted in-depth case studies with the 4 mobile network operators highlighted. So Zain Cash Iraq, Vodacom Mozambique, Jazz Cash Pakistan, and Paltel Group in Jawan in Palestine. And for each case study, we looked at the different operating models adopted by each M&O in response to each of their respective humanitarian situations, their key reasons for engagement, and what success factors enable these M&Os to find sustainable solutions to do just that and help those in need. So now I'll just dig into the key insights. So over the past several years, there's been a shift in the humanitarian sector, and it is now generally accepted that mobile technology can provide a lifeline to populations affected by disaster and facilitate more dignified and self-reliant approaches to the provision of humanitarian aid when used appropriately. We wanted this research to provide evidence that helps MNOs make informed decisions about engaging in partnerships with humanitarian organisations and to help humanitarian actors better understand their MNO partners and build successful long-term partnerships. And these are very important understandings, especially in contexts such as Ethiopia, where there are still in the preliminary stages of cultivating such partnerships with regards to using mobile money for cash transfers. As the visual shows, we wanted to highlight the unique core competencies and expertise MNOs and humanitarian organisations, and to emphasise that in proper combination, these expertise can improve the coordination, effectiveness and outcomes of joint response and recovery efforts. So as an example, and highlighted by the arrows on the slide, for mobile network operators, these include technical expertise, regulatory understanding and data and consumer insights. While for humanitarians, it includes understanding the landscape of need, as well as having protection expertise and trusted relationships with those affected by crises. So appropriately combining these respective expertise will result in a more nuanced understanding of how and for what purpose mobile technology can be used in each context, as well as ensuring any program introduced does not exacerbate existing inequalities. Next slide, please. So through our research, we identified 3 areas where partnerships can help improve the delivery and effectiveness of humanitarian assistance. The example I gave in the previous slide highlights how expertise of MNOs and humanitarians can enable context-specific digital interventions that meet the needs of everyone in an affected community, and would fall under the 2 areas highlighted in the slide: country, crisis and context, and user understanding. To give a quick example around the final area identified, reach and scale, MNOs have extensive and robust infrastructure systems, distribution models, including agent networks, and often long-term relationship with customers who can also be recipients of humanitarian assistance depending on the context. Meanwhile, humanitarian organisations have strong community ties, the trust of end users and field staff who are engaged with communities. So these competencies are particularly important when considering using mobile money for CVA programs. When these strengths are combined, partners can support service delivery for not only those in urban and easier to reach settings, but those in remote, harder to reach or geographically dispersed settings as well. Next slide, please. So from our interviews and wider engagements, several common features of successful partnerships emerged. The 4 areas identified for both partners essentially boil down to ensuring ample time is given to allow all involved to be on the same page in terms of what is required and what can be realistically expected from the partnership. For MNOs, it's about recognising what can be realistically delivered. So as an example, if a CVA programme in a very hard to reach location requires a higher level of resources, both financial and otherwise, this should be made clear in any proposal. This links to the advice to humanitarians to share the bigger picture. If MNOs know how what they are being asked to do fits into wider humanitarian programmatic objectives, they are better placed to not only provide specific services the humanitarian organisation is seeking, but also consider if there are other services they could provide alongside it. And for both, there is a need to understand each other's operating models. MNOs need to recognise the requirements of humanitarian organisations, especially the requirements to do no harm and avoid programmes that introduce or exacerbate existing inequalities, which the use of technology can do if introduced inappropriately. Likewise, humanitarians need to understand the local digital ecosystem to be best placed to use the most relevant digital solutions, as well as to recognise the need for sustainable business models for mobile network operators to be able to sustain providing quality services to the sector, though this does not always apply in the case of a rapid onset crisis where getting help to those in need of immediate assistance takes precedence. Slide, please. Thank you. So for those seeking out a partnership with an MNO, these 4 values are a useful way of framing how best to engage them. For any partnership to succeed, there must be a clear motivation to participate. For an MNO, these 4 values and the questions that need to be answered to assess them help in understanding whether a partnership is feasible. So the nature of any proposed engagement will determine the weight given to each value, but it would likely be an amalgamation of these that determines the value proposition to MNOs. So our research also highlighted that for MNOs and humanitarians, they often share a common user base and have common objectives. And partnerships with a well-designed solution can present a win-win-win scenario. So for the recipients of assistance, for the mobile network operator, and for humanitarian organisations as well. So as the landscape of humanitarian response continues to change, both in response to shifts in the nature of crisis and funding patterns, it is clear that the humanitarian sector will increasingly rely on MNOs and the wider private sector to help deliver impactful services for recipients. And we hope the insights from this report can go some way in helping to cultivate successful partnerships and consequently help in achieving this goal. The last slide was essentially just there it is. And essentially just to highlight that if you require a more in-depth understanding of this research, please do read the full report, which includes a dedicated case study for each MNO interviewed, providing a background to their involvement in the humanitarian sector and how they responded to humanitarian crises in their respective contexts. So the report and executive summary and each case study have also been translated into each respective language and published as standalone reports. And we've also published a number of blogs to demonstrate how each MNO has responded to the current pandemic. And all of this can be found on our website. So I'll stop there and hand over to the next reader, but please reach out if you have any questions. Thanks for listening.
Many thanks, Belinda. Before our next presenter come on board, just quick reminder again, please do put your questions in the chat, put your name and organization, and to whom among the presenters you are going to be addressing that question to. My colleague Josie at background will be compiling of the questions and we'll be going through them individually after the webinar, after the session, the presentation are done. Our next presenter is Theodoros Assefa-Beshrat. He is one of our consultants in Ethiopia itself, who's been brought on board to lead the technical aspect of our current partnership with ECHO-CCD in Ethiopia. His presentation is going to be focusing on the context analysis and the capability assessment of mobile money ecosystem for humanitarian cash transfer programs in Ethiopia itself. Theodoros will tell you a little bit more about himself before he starts his presentation. Theo, over to you.
Thank you very much, Isaac. Can you hear me good?
Yes, loud and clear. Great.
So good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, depending on where you are connected to this webinar. So my name is Theodoros Assefa. I'm a senior delivery systems and payments advisor working in the East Africa region. So the next presentation will be mine and walk you through. Of course, I do understand that a number of presenters following my presentation, so I'll try to avoid duplications as much as possible. Next slide, please. So like Isaac mentioned, this presentation is as a result of a partnership between GSMA and CCD. As you can see, of course, this was described by Josie, so I'll not repeat. Next slide, please. So this partnership between GSMA and CCD has two main objectives. And number one is, of course, build the capability of CCD Network and the ECHO Consortium to do e-transfer and digital identity systems in Ethiopia. Number two is assess the feasibility, efficiency, and effectiveness of the use of mobile money for CCD beyond the current ECHO collaboration. Next slide, please. So this presentation pretty much tries to highlight the context, pretty much tries to highlight the context and capability of the mobile money ecosystem in the country. And of course, this presentation is part of a broader framework document that was produced as a result of this partnership, and I'll try to highlight some of the key outcomes of the framework document. Next slide, please. Of course, I don't want to bore you with details, but in developing this document, we've employed a number of methodologies. And these are some. Of course, prior to this webinar, we had a couple of webinars as well that enabled us to enrich this document further so that the CCD network could use it as a guiding document. Thank you for moving to the next slide. So slide number 4. So when we talk about mobile money ecosystem, of course, this could differ from country to country, but when we look at Ethiopia, the first thing that comes to mind is the two key critical players in the ecosystem. One is Ethio Telecom. This is the telecom operator in the country. We have one telecom operator in the country, that is Ethio Telecom. Number 2 is the National Bank, which actually regulates, issues licenses, and regulates the overall financial institutions and operation in the country. And in relation to mobile money, the first agent and mobile money directive came about in 2012. But it wasn't until 2015 that mobile money was actually piloted for social cash transfer program, and that took place when the Ministry of Finance, as part of the country's national financial inclusion strategy, tried to test the use of mobile money for social cash transfers in the PSNP program. Next slide, please. So when we look at some of the data as of course, December 2019, you have about 10 banks and 8 MFIs with 10 different products that provide mobile money services in the country. And as a result, we have, a little over 10 million accounts, mobile money accounts in the country. Next slide, please. So, of course, you may ask, who are the players? Who are the key players in this mobile money ecosystem? Of course, this may not be an exhaustive list, but you have a CVA implementer, which is a cash and voucher assistance implementer. You have the clients, you have the technology providers, you have the telco, agent and merchants, and of course you have government. And by government, I mean there are a number of government players that are involved in the social cash transfer sphere. One is the Ministry of Agriculture, which of course my good friend Teddy will explain later on. The other one is the National Disaster Risk Commission, which also looks at the humanitarian response sphere. And of course, you have the National Bank and ECHO-CCD. Thank you. So services. Of course, there are a number of services that the existing service providers provide. And these are, of course, not exhaustive again, but these are the things that the mobile platform provide. So you do deposits, withdrawals, send money, utility payments, bill payments, merchant payments, receive money, and of course you do registration and as part of your KYC. Next slide, please. So there are a number of access channels that are deployed currently in the ecosystem. One is USSD. Of course, this is a dial-in short text menu that is customizable and offers different language options, and this is mostly widely used in the country. You have IVR, which is interactive voice response. You have SMS, which is often used for push notifications like texts and information. You have a mobile app. Of course, when you talk about social cash transfers in a humanitarian setting and in Ethiopia, where access is not yet fully done, mobile app may not be relevant. But then you have web access, where service providers allow organizations to access the web portal through which they could push payments, do disbursements, and solicit reporting. And then, of course, you have API, application program interface, where organizations can link their applications with the application of the service provider and do those cash transfer activities online. Next slide, please. So how it works is a bank or an MFI, of course, given recent developments in the regulation sphere, there are new developments in terms of who the players could be in terms of providing mobile money service. But when you look at banks and MFIs, they either license the software or through a revenue sharing agreement, they do this services currently. Next slide, please. So what are the basic requirements for, let's say, a humanitarian cash transfer beneficiary to be enrolled in a mobile money platform? Of course, one is an ID card, and this could be a government-issued ID card, or it could be a program ID card that is issued by the intervention. The other one is a mobile phone, numerical and digital literacy by the beneficiary, and then a network. But when we talk about mobile phones, please, the previous slide. So when we talk about mobile phones, of course, when you look at mobile phone ownership in the country, it's not really that great. It's not really that encouraging at this point. But there are a number of customizations that were deployed. For example, in the PSNP, which I'm sure Desta and Terry will cover later on, that we've used to reach beneficiaries and networks. Of course, as of now, the network penetration is about 45%. And when you look at rural areas, they're not as much covered. So these are pretty much, the 4 requirements, not exhaustive, of course, that we would need to enroll people in this platform. Next slide, please. Thank you. So there are a number of implementation steps for any humanitarian player to engage a service provider, of course, from contracting to beneficiary enrollment, education and support, disbursement of funds, authentication. This is one critical issue that is under the table in different platforms, how to do authentication when you have several infrastructure limitations in the country, and the other one is cash out. Of course, these are simple steps. They look simple steps, but when it comes to actual delivery and actual engagement, there are a number of factors to consider, like coordination, reporting, and data protection, which, of course, is not really a clear line at this point. Next slide, please. So who are the players in the ecosystem? Of course, I'd like to first say that this is not exhaustive. This is a sample was drawn from the broader framework document, but you have, of course, HelloCash and Ember, which are very popular. We've been in the business for long. In fact, when PSMP started using mobile money, these were the two players that actually facilitated the success story that the PSMP is about in the sub-Saharan region. So they've contributed a great deal to what it is right now. But you have, of course, a commercial bank, you have Dashin Bank, who are now expanding the service, but CBE, HelloCash, and Ember have a much better competitive edge at this point. Next slide. So what is an example of CVA by the government? So, of course, this is a popular story, so I'm sure many of you do know the PSMP, the Productive Safety Net Program of Ethiopia. They launched the use of mobile money in 2015, and ever since it has grown rapidly, and it has become a very big success story. And as of 2020, if you look at the number of districts that actually deploy mobile money, is astonishing, is 38%. And the number of districts that only use cash that deploy mobile money is about 50%. And overall, when you look at the number of beneficiaries under the PSMP program, you have about 7.9 million beneficiaries, and of those, 36.4 are actually enrolled in the mobile money. And when you look at the total cash that flows through the system, is about 37% of $207 million every single year. And of course, the PSMP accounts for 1 million plus accounts since 2015. Next slide, please. So this is some of the examples of humanitarian agencies that have tried to deploy a digital system or a mobile money initiative. And the first one is JOP, which used an e-voucher system in Amhara in response to a natural hazard. We have WFP, who used the fresh food voucher to mobile money through HelloCash and Lion Bank partnership. You have the Prime project, which took place in 2016 in Somali region, and this was Mercy Corps actually bought mobile phones for beneficiaries and tried to deliver cash transfers as part of a subsidy program. Next slide, please. So of course, I mean, these are success stories, but there are a number of challenges which I'm sure my colleagues in the next presentations will highlight. But infrastructure is a challenge, of course. It is 45%. Phone ownership, when you try to reach beneficiaries in rural settings, most people don't have actually phones, and if they have, they actually share phones. So that's at a lower level. You have agent network problems. There is a huge agent dropout problem, which has been one of the key challenges in the PSMP. Liquidity is, as you go far away from rural cities, you have liquidity issues where the bank's holding capacity is very limited, and replenishment actually takes time, so that would impact the timeliness of transfers to your beneficiaries. And of course, there's capacity issues at financial institution level, especially at MFIs. And if you look at the current arrangement, it's actually the technology providers that actually do a lot of the heavy lifting and the deployment of mobile money in the country. And of course, you have a broader issue around literacy and awareness, which should actually be sustained and be integrated as part of the country's national financial inclusion strategy and literacy and awareness programs. So these are some of the key challenges that you will have to grapple with if you aim to actually use mobile money in this ecosystem. Next slide, please. Of course, not everything is bleak. There are a number of developments in the country since 2018. There are a number of directives and the regulations that have come out that are very encouraging and that actually help the humanitarian agencies and others to aspire to engage in technology. One is a recent directive by the National Bank on payment instrument issuers. So this will allow fintechs to actually serve as a digital financial service providers, so that it will place them on an equal level with MFIs and banks to provide the service. This would mean that we'll have more competition, better services, better products, better pricing, and it will allow also expansion in different rural settings. And you have a payment system operators directive that came recently that will allow the private sector to engage in switching services. You have the electronic transaction bill that was issued by the Ministry of Innovation and Technology to digitize government and business services, which also makes for a better integration of digital services going forward. Next slide, please. So I've tried to make my presentation very short, as instructed by Isaac. So I'm sure I'm under 10 minutes. Thank you, and over to you.
Thank you, Teddy, for that presentation. Again, just a reminder, please do put your question in the chat box. We'll be compiling and going through them at the end of the presentation. Our next presenter is Muntaga Vince Diop. He will tell you himself about himself. And he is joining us directly from Ethiopia today. And he's one of the lead or CEO at one of the FSP locally in Ethiopia itself. So Vince, over to you. Please turn video on if you can, and your mic as well.
Yes, thank you so much. So my name is effectively Vince Muntaga Diop. So I'm the founder of Belcash. I think we can go to the next slides. Yeah, maybe we can go to the next one. I think most of the people already know about it, that Ethiopia has a very strong population. This gives us an idea about the telecom network in Ethiopia. So one of the things which has really been a big challenge when we started in 2015 was mainly the quality of the network. And we have to say that today the quality has grown tremendous. But when we started, Ethio Telecom was fully in terms of changing its system. So we will come back to this. What are the issues that we have been facing on the telco level? Next slide, please.
Hey Vince, as you put in your next slide, could you please tilt your camera to face you, because we can only see your ceiling.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me try to get it right. Yeah, so I think the camera is not working as I would like it to work. So let me continue, please. So
okay,
the next slide, please. Yeah, this gives a little bit an idea about what Belcash has done in Ethiopia. So mainly Belcash provides platforms and services like onboarding, call center services, data centers. And we have three major platforms. One platform is Hello Cash Payment. Hello Cash Payment is for agent and mobile banking. So we have to be careful when we speak about fintechs. In our case, we are more a tech service provider, was providing platform as a service and make sure that the banks have all the necessary other services were necessary. Like when we came, there was no data center or very few data centers. So we had to provide the banks with data center facilities. Call center was also very few. But some of the numbers that we are very proud about is that today the Hello Cash network is a partnership between, in fact, 5 banks, 4 banks and 1 microfinance. 64 billion birr has been transiting on the platform. 10,000 agents have been created in less than 5 years. 1.5 million users. We do around 100,000 transactions daily for a total amount of close to 100 million birr on a daily basis. So if we can go to the next slide. This gives an idea about the partnership that we have. So for sure, the most important partners for us is the banks itself, but we have also partnership with international remittance in terms of providing the integration, ECHO-Telecom, it's a no-brainer. We have also a platform which is in the e-commerce space, so we also work with the Post and some major players in Ethiopia. Next slide. Yeah, so this is concerning the humanitarian aspect. So mainly we have been working on the fresh food voucher program for a total amount of 159 million birr. We have also been working on SIP in the Somali region for 11 million birr. It's mainly about making sure that farmers can receive some help in case that we are in a difficult situation in terms of drought. PSNP, it's a no-brainer. So the cash disbursement has been around 684 million and CTP around 10 million birr. So if we look to the total amount of disbursement, we speak about close to 900 million birr. Next slide. Yeah, so one of the things that you can see in the cash disbursement, in this case is a Hello Cash Fresh Corner, to Hello Cash Fresh voucher, sorry, there is a mistake. So you can see that the cash disbursement is something which is also linked, in this case, to time frames. It's not the whole year that we are busy with it, but you can also see it growing from year to year. If you can go to the next slide. This is a case of PSNP, where we can also see exactly the same tendencies that the previous slides. Next slide, please. So this gives us a total. So maybe we can go to the next one. Yes, I think that is the important part, is what have we been learning. So the first thing we have been confronted to was mainly telco for sure. But also one thing we didn't expect at all was the issues in terms of energy. So one thing we find out is that a lot of these social beneficiaries, in fact, or they have a phone which doesn't have a real powerful charger and they don't have at home energy, so they go once a week, I would say, to the main cities, and then they charge a phone. So probably they will be busy with having a charged phone for 2 or 3 days, and you have also a lot who just have only a SIM card. So one of the way we have been able to handle that was through solar systems. The second thing was end user, the connectivity. So definitively, when it comes to connectivity, the main issue was what type of phones does it have? So we have seen very, very few smartphones. So we made sure that we based our solution on USSD. And I think it's very important for ECHO-Telecom to realize that the USSD in the areas where we are very present is absolutely critical. To handle the telecom network is to make sure that ECHO-Telecom we have been sometimes in very difficult cases. There is one case we have not nominated. It was an emergency case where there was cholera in the region. And then we have been handling with ECHO-Telecom a very difficult situation. ECHO-Telecom has really done its best. But I think it will be great if ECHO-Telecom had some mobile towers that they could bring in some areas in emergency in cases like this one. One of the things we're also now building is to make sure that we have omni-channel capacity, where if the USSD is down, we can use web or even chatbots. How to reinforce the agent network? What we have learned in the last years is that the banks, as well as MFIs, started to provide loans to the agents, sometimes to make sure that they have a stronger relation with them. The value proposition, we believe, can be better than what we have today. And we also find out that when we provide them with the solar equipment, somewhere it created a greater relationship between us and the agents. Next slide. The KYC, initially we were very afraid about how difficult would it be to get the KYC done properly. But we have seen that by working with the local authorities, it was manageable. So our experience was that you can make it happen as long as you work very, very closely with the existing the authorities. And we have started to integrate biometrics in our solution so that fingerprints, eye recognition could be used. Then the liquidity issue that I think everybody in the domain have it. So there is no miracle on that. It's really about making sure that your network have. In Ethiopia, we don't have super agents, so the banks themselves are in the branches, in fact, act like super agents. So it's very important that the branches are fully involved. And as much as possible in the future, I believe that the interoperability will help a lot. That means that, in fact, even if you don't have a branch of, the agent doesn't have a branch of his own bank, he still can go to the branch of another bank. And how to maintain end users active, which also has been one of our biggest challenge. So it's good for us to have a group. It's around 110,000 people we have been serving. But we see that if we were able to give them microloans, if we were able to provide them other services, and we have also seen a big difference between, in fact, the banks and the agents, banks and the microfinance agents, because microfinance are not allowed to be in the international remittance space where banks are. So if that agent can also be used in a way that international remittance can be given to him, to the end user, that maintains him also alive, active, let me put it like that. Next slide. So the benefits, I think everybody knows that the benefits that have been mentioned previously, but one of the three major things is really the financial literacy of the population. We have been really, really surprised to see that people who could not really read were absolutely able to handle a phone and to make transactions. It reinforced the infrastructure in remote areas for the banks as well as the MFIs. We have seen a great improvement of the regulation in the last, especially in the last 6 months. So these are the points that we wanted to mention. Next slide, please. So what are the new features that we as a Belcash, as a tech provider, will provide to the HelloCash platforms? It's mainly to make it as much as possible omni-channel. The interoperability. We're thinking not only about an interoperability between the banks we have, but also an interoperability between the HelloCash network and the other networks. The integration with the regular core banking. The integration also bank-to-bank through ECHO-Switch. We are thinking about also delivering a prepaid debit card which could be connected to the platform and allowing, in fact, also to use ATMs, which will reinforce the agent network. And one of the things we are working on is also a scoring capacity, especially for rural areas, where the data doesn't need to be the data of financial data, but also other type of data, like how big is the land of the person, how many cows does he have, and so on, so that we could have a kind of scoring capacity which will facilitate for the banks micro loans and overdrafts. In the solar sector, where we have invested recently through a company named Hello Solar, we have been extremely pleased to see that the default rate is very low. It's around 1.5%, which is one of the best. And that allows us, in fact, also to start to provide solar equipment to the farmers. So we can go now to the next slice, which is the last one. So we as a group, we think that what we should try to get is that an agent is not only an agent for financial transaction, but also that he can provide solar pumps on a pay-as-you-go basis, home systems. We are also doing, we are in the space of health on distance advising, education, and we have an e-commerce platform that we have rolled out nationwide. It's mainly products from IDs, and more we are looking how can we integrate that with the network of digital hubs that we have been building in the rural areas. Thank you so much for your attention, and I'm really sorry about the camera.
Wonderful. Thank you, Vince, for the great presentation. I'm sure you'll get a lot of questions during the Q&A. Great presentation. Our next presenter or speaker will be Desta Bayisa. He will introduce himself and tell us a little bit about himself before he goes into his presentation. Over to you, Desta.
Well, thank you very much. Welcome again to the webinar, everyone. My name is Desta. I am a Deputy CEO of Almost ICT. I was providing technology for employee service. So I'm very grateful to provide you brief information about what is EMBER and then what's EMBER doing to support humanitarian cash transfer in Ethiopia at the moment. So EMBER is a mobile money product. We do much of conventional financial services customized to local need. We allow Ethiopian population, especially rural city, to send money, buy goods and do payments, pay bills, and do some bulk transfers like social cash transfers, e-payments, and so on. So we have integrated different businesses into the platform, and we are allowing this online payment is from the convenience of mobile devices. Next slide, please. So the EMBER network is growing fast. We've started the commercially. This service is launched in 2015, but it's really growing fast. Over 2 million customers at the moment, and more than 17,000 locations in the country, and greater than 29 billion of transactions at the moment. So I would like to focus on the cash transfer section on this presentation, and we have already got lots of partners working with us to enable cash transfer across the country. So we have a Tigray social cash transfer in Tigray region, PSNP in 4 regions, Amara, Oromia, Southern Nations, and Tigray again. And we have Relief Society of Tigray. We have Mercy Corpus doing transfers in Oromia, Catholic Relief Society in Oromia, FH in Amara region. So we've got these all partners already doing humanitarian transfer using EMBER platform. So when we see the humanitarian cash distribution statistics, as I have mentioned, we have started the commercial launch with the financial institutions to provide this service in 2015 with a few pilots in one region, and then it's really growing fast over the last 4 years, already reaching 1 million accounts at the moment, and serving more than 5 million beneficiaries directly using or benefited from the transfer to these accounts. And we've already established more than 3,000 POPs in rural areas to enable this cash movement is working. So based on this, we can say that it's really scalable based on our experience, and it's affordable with the manual processes and activities that exist before the digital transfer start. And obviously it's really improving the use cases in humanitarian section as per our observations. Next slide, please. So the context is very different when we talk about digital transfers in humanitarian sector. Then something that we expect in our mind about the infrastructures, the technology, and the end users, and the actual reality on the ground is very different. So we have to go through different innovations, and we have to think on how should we enable the existing infrastructure to work for the digital transfers. So we have different kind of beneficiaries. When we provide digital account, then we also go through different authentication mechanisms to fit the local situation. So largely we have many customers that have mobile devices, but more than 80% of the existing accounts don't have a mobile device, but we're using a technology that allows end users to use digital account and then use outlets mobile phone to access their accounts and so on. So the authentication mechanism also varies based on the nature of the beneficiaries. Some of the beneficiaries are able to use PIN codes, standard PIN codes, and most of them are not able to read and remember PIN codes, and we have to provide them NFC, which is stored customers' PIN. And we have to also think about biometric authentication mechanisms for those who are not even able to use NFC and the card, the SIM, and also PIN codes. So So most of our beneficiaries, as I mentioned, most of the accounts that the financial institution provide for humanitarian transfers don't have the mobile device, and also they work with little literacy, so that they have to really provide the simplest model to make it working on the ground. So one of the things that we learned in this process is that the beneficiary's journey is evolutionary to actually just finally conclude that they are getting benefit of financial inclusion, benefit of financial service in the process of humanitarian transfer. So more than 90% of the beneficiaries don't have awareness about financial services at all initially. So the first step is to actually aware them about the financial service, and then in addition to that, about e-payments. So then there should be a proper awareness of e-payment, and then moving beneficiaries to understand on how they should operate their e-payment accounts and how they should secure themselves through authentication mechanisms. But during the humanitarian transfer, I think the main focus is timelessness, the speed of the transfer. So at the first stage, we are largely, or the financial institutions are focusing to address the transfer, and then actually also helping the beneficiaries to get benefit of the financial inclusion, financial services associated to this digital account. So these beneficiaries, even though they are initially not using all the packets, all the benefits of the digital account, we have learned that at the end, eventually after 2 years, after frequent trials and after frequent practice, they are now really getting benefit of the digital account. They are saving, they are receiving remittances from different locations on their account, they're saving their time, and they are actually becoming more and more aware of the financial services and how they change their life with the digital account provided to them for the humanitarian transfer purpose. So the outcome is, so we believe that this initiative added lots of convenience to the end users in terms of introducing regularity, because there was just a very increasing predictability in digital transfers than what the manual transfer was offering. So the process of initiating payment and actually crediting the account and enabling the networks to disperse actual cash is just regular, and then everybody knows that when it is going to be done and how it's going to be done. So it's avoiding much of uncertainty and increasing predictability and providing much more speed than before, and of course accessibility, because in manual payment processes, then beneficiaries gather at a fixed point. Then they're not really having a permanent pay points in their local area to access their money every time. So conveniency is, I think, something that actually we can say is a benefit for humanitarian beneficiaries from this kind of financial arrangements. So in another way, standardization is one of the big benefits we can speak of. Because so we use the same KYC across the pay pointers for enrollment and also for disbursement. So it is benefiting those organizations who actually transfer this to the recipients, also benefiting recipients to have a standard way of enrollment and payments as well. So standardization also in another way adding confidence to the wider network for the recipients and for the organizations who use the platform to transfer to recipients. So financial inclusion on this. So financial inclusion, I am not only speaking of the payment, savings, withdrawals, transfers, and loans. I think financial literacy is something that we actually can see as a bold here, because as I mentioned earlier, most of the humanitarian beneficiaries are not aware of the financial service at all. So it requires a lot of effort to bring them up to speed for them to actually utilize the whole benefits of the financial service associated to the digital account, the digital transfer. So from financial literacy to all the packets of digital accounts, and this is something that we add in the effect of financial inclusion in the sector. So we can also say that behavioral change is one of the impacts. So it has changed the way beneficiaries spend their money, because once the humanitarian beneficiary is provided with financial service, financial account, then they actually are motivated to keep some of the money on their account and only access the cash based on their needs. So they're not forced to collect all the cash together and spend it without planned consumption and so on. So it has different researches has shown us that actually it has also changed the way the beneficiaries spend their money on their local consumption. So the other big benefits is related to the data, and the data is then driving learnings for the tech fintech companies like us, for the financial institutions, and for the policymakers at all. So we have seen that lots of new or recent directives has benefited a lot from the learnings we had in this rural transfer, because the criteria set for most of the digital transfer outlets and even the KYC set for the beneficiaries is really difficult to comply as you go down to the area where you do humanitarian transfer. But I think we have seen some of flexibility around the criteria followed for the agencies, and especially also the KYC required for the customers. And we believe that will drive more a change in policy and of course in technology, and then furthermore in the future. Next slide. So my colleagues have already mentioned lots of challenges around the sector. I think something that I mentioned is also a telecom in terms of the outreach and of course interruptions. So most of the humanitarian transfers are conducted around the poor infrastructure areas. So the poor infrastructure areas, so operating accounts on this sort of accounts infrastructure level is really difficult on actual sense. So we are actually trying to make it work offline technology, because humanitarian transfers, as we all know, can't wait longer, adjusting the network, adjusting everything. So the aim is to have fast delivery of transfers. So we believe this is going to change as upcoming competitions and all the privatization initiatives are aiming quality and outreach in the country. So literacy and security, so lots of things has been discussed there. And again, I think the process of opening account and providing authentication mechanism is not enough for humanitarian transfers. So a lot to be done to actually fully arm beneficiaries through the evolutionary path. So then a big focus on deploying innovative literacy solutions, and of course providing simple technological processes for both the outlet operators and then of course the final customers. And availability of agencies and POPs. So we can see this in two ways. I think it's very difficult to find businesses when you go down to the remote areas in the country that can act as outlets, qualify regulatory requirements, as I mentioned before. And also, at the same time, liquidity issues. So I think it's very important to work with rural financial institutions here. So we are actually finding a way to look at solutions much more on rural financial institutions like cooperatives, rural cooperatives, SACCOs, how they should link up with MFIs to broaden this network and to actually provide this liquidity solution. But from our experience, we are really championing on this because our MFIs have much more penetrated branches, but also we're building up on this to actually expand this technology further to rural financial institutions. So the final issue I just need to mention here in terms of in terms of challenges, again, the KYC largely. So the database, most of the time, the humanitarian database are not built taking into consideration the formal financial institutions KYC requirements. So there are two aspects here. So one is that actually looking at the compliance of regulatory requirements to compliance to technological processes, so automation of these inputs of the humanitarian database to financial services and outputs of the financial service database to process the payment to finance beneficiaries. So as I mentioned, a good regulatory changes recently, but also we're looking at the technological aspect at the moment, initiating interoperability to the humanitarian database, and then of course the financial institution database to fully automate this process back and forth, and to avoid manual interventions and actually benefit from standardizations, quality, and accuracy. Yeah, so that's it. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Gustav, for the great presentation. Again, please do keep your question coming through. We have just one more presentation left, and then we're gonna go directly into the Q&As. Our next speaker is Tewodros Teseo Kebede. He will tell us a little bit about himself, and then he'll go straight into his presentation. Teddy, over to you. Teddy, we seem not to hear you.
Can you hear me, Isaac?
Yes, loud and clear now. Please go ahead.
Okay, perfect. Okay, perfect. So my name is Tewodros. So I support the Ministry of Agriculture, which is the lead implementer of the Productive Safety Net Program, PSNP. And we will see briefly our experience in using mobile money for delivering social safety net payments. Okay, so just to give you a brief introduction, so Productive Safety Net is a government program. It's a social safety net for a welfare program, which includes also, which identifies households which are prone in extreme poverty and with the risk of food insecurity. And it tries to support them on a regular basis to make sure that they are not impacted by the impacts of climate change and also other hardships. So the program started from 2005, and currently we're just finishing up our fourth round, which is PSNP 4, and the PSNP 5 is expected to start in the coming months, which would be a 5 years program. We support nearly 8 million people across 8 regions and covering now recently, because of additions, 408 waradas. And it has somewhere between $2.5 to $3 billion for the program. And in terms of annual transfers, we disperse close to $500 million annually. Next, please. So the key aspect when we say PSNP is we have different components. So we have other interventions such as livelihood, public work, and so on. But the main component is the transfers or payments. So when we do payments, we have 3 types of payments, depending on the area and the specific needs. In some cases, we make payments in the form of cash. And in some cases, now it's being reduced. There are also beneficiaries who receive payments through food in areas where the market does not support providing cash. And also there are some areas that we provide a mix of cash and food as a form of payments to beneficiaries. When doing these payments, there are key principles or key aspects of the payment that we try to meet. The first one is that timeliness, for example, because these people are in need, they are vulnerable part of the society, so we have to make sure that they receive payments in a timely and predictable manner. So timeliness is one of the key aspects, and which e-payment is also one of the the reason why e-payment is considered also as a preferred payment method. Another one would be predictability. We also try to see appropriateness of the payment modality that is being used, whether depending on the market context. And we have to make sure also people are able to access their payments, and also that the payment is given a priority over other activities. Next slide. So when we make payments, like I mentioned earlier, there are some areas that receive payments in the form of food, but the majority of the PaySNP beneficiaries receive their payments in the form of cash, whereby on a monthly basis they receive payments. So when we do cash payments, we have two modalities. One is what we call manual cash payments. In this case, it is a government cashier district which goes to the qabalis or the where the beneficiaries are located, and makes the payment using a payroll. So this is one. And the second one is electronic payments or e-payments, where beneficiaries have a bank account or a mobile wallet, and that the payment is deposited into their account, and they are able to make withdrawals at their local merchant who serves as an agent, or in some cases also the service providing MFI provides cash out service on the locality. Next. So looking at the e-payments usage, so currently we are using electronic payments in nearly 149 waradas out of the current 181, but which will grow to 400 waradas. So these are receiving their payments on using e-payments. There are nearly 1 million households who, as a result of PaySNP payments, have mobile money accounts at the service providing banks or MFIs. And on a monthly basis, we have processed over 150 million USD through e-payments on an annual basis. So this is the data for as of January 2020, and it covers the 1 year previous. Looking at the advantages and the disadvantages of using the e-payments. So the advantages have been also, some of them have been mentioned earlier by Ato Desta from Ember. So one is creating the efficiency, whereby the government focuses on the program delivery, and the payment part is outsourced to specialized financial service provider. And secondly, it's also reducing and becoming more cost effective, whereby instead of investing so much in payrolls, personnel, security, and so on, associated with manual payments, using e-payments is expected and has shown to have benefits in terms of saving costs. Due to days of digital channels, since all the transactions are traceable, people have bank accounts or mobile wallets, then the traceability also adds transparency to the program, and it's also part of the compliance with our multiple stakeholders, including donor partners. And fourthly, also at the national level, as you know, Ethiopia, we have one of the lowest rate in terms of financial inclusion. So we also believe that using e-payments for social safety nets will also increase the rate of financial inclusion, whereby these people, poor households, which usually don't have financial access to finance, will be able to have the first taste of what it means to have a bank account and using digital channels, so through the social cash transfers. Some of the disadvantages, let's say, were also one because of dependency on service providers. This is versus the government or the implementer doing the whole aspect end-to-end by itself, versus outsourcing to service providers tends to have bring its own set of challenges. There is also the additional sensitization, training, and monitoring required for e-payment stakeholders, that is to our personnel on the ground, to the beneficiaries, and so on, which requires time and investment versus the traditional method of manual payments. And also, thirdly, most of the e-payments transactions or solutions being offered require some sort of telecom infrastructure, at least basic USSD or basic GSM connectivity. So also there is a need in most cases for mobile wallets or mobile monies to have, for the beneficiaries to have mobile phones, which may not be available in the program areas, and also in the context of the household's economic capacity. Next. So implementing e-payments on productive safety net program, some of the operational challenges that we have seen can be summarized in 4. The first one, as mentioned earlier as well, it's a telecom network, whereby some waradas or qabales is the most, it's around 1,000 households. So some of the waradas in qabales do not have a network, or even if they have a network, it may not be reliable. So there could be various interruptions or dropouts, and also in some cases the locations don't have the density of the telecommunication is limited to geographically to only a certain parts or the city surrounding city areas. So this has been one of the operational challenges. And also, for example, in some waradas identified or for e-payments, once we get into the implementation, we also have faced difficulty in terms of the quality of the network. So this has been one of the issue, and this has also impacted the timeliness of the payments, the security of the transactions, and also access to beneficiaries of cash out points. Secondly, the cash out points have also been a challenge. For example, the number of agents or cash out points available in some cases was not adequate enough. For example, we have a certain parameter or ratio whereby we want to match certain number of cash out points to certain number of beneficiaries to make sure it is convenient, it is accessible, and it's also to avoid queuing, which happens when you have limited number of cash out points. Also in some areas where the agents have been available, there is also a lot of dropout. So in some cases, the agents have a higher cost of operations, which makes the commissions paid by service providers not sufficient enough, or also maybe the amount of work required, especially dealing with the beneficiary profiles, and so that tends to take a heavy toll on the agents. It's also important to note here, for example, traditionally we would expect mobile money agents to have their own set of other business engagements and to be doing cash outs on the side. But what happens is in most cash transfer programs, or including the PaySNP, at that particular number of days when the payment is to happen, the agent is overwhelmed with the number of beneficiaries. That means the agent is not able to do his regular job. So the agent has to dedicate his whole time, at least for those particular days, to the agency business and to perform cash out. So this also has been a turn-off for some of the agents. Thirdly, also within this, the cash out points, agents also capacity in terms of liquidity has also impacted. Like as you know, there is a huge amount of money that is transferred to a particular area, and especially when the number of agents are low, that means the agents needs to pay us like 1,000, 2,000, even more people at the same time, which means that he needs to have sufficient cash to be able to pay. So this has been also some of the problems. Of course, we have tried to mitigate this working with our service providers, whereby in some cases agents were provided some advance cash. In some cases, for example, the service provider has sent its own personnel to support and to perform cash out at the locations and so on. But this has been one of the challenges. Thirdly, it's also is the PIN security. So in most cases of mobile money, the majority of the service providers offer PIN as a form of authenticating transactions, but this requires mobile phones. So if there is no mobile phones, then they would need to use a shared mobile phone, which is sometimes it could be the phone of the agent. So this has also opened doors for security risks, whereby some agents have access to their PINs, or beneficiaries also tend to forget their PIN cards or lose their PIN cards and so on, which has been also an issue. So the absence of mobile phone device at the beneficiary level and the use of a shared mobile phone has been one of the challenges in terms of safety. We have also had a few incidents for example, biometric authentications with one of our service providers, but that also has a higher cost in terms of implementation, whereby the enrollment process, you need devices for authentication and so on, has been a challenge when we tried with biometrics. And also in some cases, also the accuracy of the biometric had also created some challenges in terms of replacing the PIN with biometrics. And fourth, the literacy and awareness level of the beneficiaries had also impacted or became a challenge for e-payment, because in the case of manual payments, the majority of the activity is done by the cashier, who checks the payroll file, performs the cash, and asks for a signature or a finger thumb. But in the case of electronic payments, there are some efforts or processes that are required to be done by the beneficiary. And considering the literacy level, the basic literacy, numerical literacy, and as well as the digital literacy of beneficiaries, that has also created a challenge. For example, unable to interact with the mobile phones, or unable to read the processes and so on, which made them very much dependent on the agents and also on the bank staff. Also, for example, the quality of the education and the sensitization that they receive, for example, in terms of keeping PIN security, PINs privately, and so on, has also caused them to potential fraud by agents and others. So just to summarize, the challenges can be summarized by the the connectivity, the cash out points, the security related with PIN or others, and the literacy and awareness. Moving on. So, but we have had some of the best practices, just to list the best practices that we have seen implementing electronic payments. So one, it's because the program would like to implement cash first principle. That's one of the principles of the PCNP program. And this has been also, the electronic payments has helped us in terms of going that direction. There is also a significant payments in the last 4 years, which now we are covering almost 1/3 of the waradas or more, or 1/3 of the beneficiaries are now using electronic payments versus manual payments. We have also received positive response from beneficiaries on the use of e-payments. We have done a couple of studies, have also been done internally and through partnership with the World Bank, which showed that the beneficiaries are from time and time more and more getting used to the electronic payments processes. Also, they reported that it has also saved them from some reductions and so on that takes cuts that tends to happen when using manual payments. We have also had accumulated vast amount of experience, knowledge, and also transaction data on electronic payments as a result of using e-payments. So now our personnel at the ground level, at the rural even level, they are aware about e-payments, what the challenges and so on, whereby at the 4 years ago that we had to start from the scratch where they didn't knew anything. So this accumulation of experience will also help us in scaling up adoption of e-payments and improving the existing challenges that we see. And going forward, also the program intends to continue and expand further to the use of electronic payments in the program in the coming years. And we are planning to go fully using electronic payments in the coming 5 years period. So that's over for me. Let me know if you have any questions on the text box. Over.
Wonderful. Many thanks, Teddy. We have about call it 30 minutes for Q&As, and there is a lot of great questions that the participants have put in the chat box. So Josie, I'm going to hand over to you just to go through them and pass each question to the presenter, the participant will ask the question to. Josie, over to you.
Yeah, hi. Okay, so I will just start at the beginning and let me get up the summary. Okay, so the first questions that we had coming through on the chat box were for Teddy, relating to the presentation on your context analysis and capability assessment for the mobile money ecosystem. So I'll read out the first two and then we can see how we go. So the first one is from Annaline Voss, IRC. Can refugees access mobile money with an ARA-issued ID card? And then the second one from Yanis Theodoro. What percentage of entitled beneficiaries are deemed to have the requisite ID documents to meet the KYC needed for a mobile wallet in their own names? So similar theme there. Teddy, over to you.
And that's for Theodros Asefa, right? Yeah, because we have two Teddys.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so to the first question is yes, because if you look at many programs, they've used the project or program, depending on what the intervention is, the program ID to register in the platform. So the short answer is yes. And the second question is, I'm trying to read is from Yanis, right? So basically, I mean, if beneficiaries don't have, for example, a government issued ID card, what happens is the program that tries to address them would issue them a client card that is linked to that intervention, and that could be used for them to register as a beneficiary and fulfill the KYC requirements. Just.
Great, thanks, Didi. So I just got a couple more questions for you. So there's one from Francesca looking to sort of clarify the change in the current situation for technology providers. So asking specifically, are they authorized to distribute cash, or do they still need to partner with a bank or MFI regardless? So can they be contracted directly by the cash actors? Just to get really clear on that answer, I think would be helpful. Yeah, and then I think I'll move on to some of the other questions for other presenters. So back to you for that last one, Teddy.
Thank you very much. I think we have Vince and Desta here. I'd really appreciate if he could hear it from the horse's mouth how these new introductions, new regulations have really changed the playing field. So maybe over to Vince and Desta to speak about it. Over.
Yeah, so thank you, Theodros. So we are absolutely not allowed to be part of the financial, to manage a float, which means that we are absolutely a tech provider, but the new regulation has something which is absolutely something which is absolutely going to help us. We can be more and more involved in the onboarding. And you can see also that in building payment aggregators, being part also of, you see that now also private companies could own equipment like point of sales, could be smart point of sales. It doesn't need to be a bank. So these are big game changers, by the way, because if third parties can buy the equipment and then have a revenue sharing based on the transaction, that means that people will start to provide devices that will go naturally all over the country. And this POS can be smart POS, where you can put mobile money on, airtime, you can put e-commerce capacity. So we think that the new regulation is absolutely fantastic in terms of what it will allow in the near future. We will have enjoyed if we could be part of, but has a company which is an Ethiopian company, but a big part of our equity is foreign. For the moment, it's not the case.
Great, thanks, Vince. And do, with any of the questions as I direct them as a specific person, if anyone else, if any of the other panelists would like to contribute, do feel free to do so. Great, okay, so moving on, this one again is directed to Teddy, but I think perhaps a few other panelists might have some things to add. So given the level of beneficiaries' numeric and digital literacy being limited, as well as limited access to mobile phones, which came up throughout a few of the presentations, which access channels would you recommend? So I guess, we've highlighted the challenges in a couple of the presentations, and given those, how would you or which access channels would you recommend?
Thank you, Jose. I'm sure colleagues will want to jump in. But my answer would be depends, because if you look at how, for example, the PSMP started, when it started, pretty much there was nothing there. I mean, it was the first test pilot, if you will, of a mobile money intervention in the country. And it started from a very, very low ground in terms of literacy, in terms of awareness. So my answer would be depends. We'd have to do assessments because things vary from region to region. Experiences vary from region to region. Of course, in some regions, for example, like Somali region, where, for example, Hello Cash is very active, the reception and acceptability of technology is higher than another region in the country. So I would say it depends. We'll have to do an assessment. You'll have to do, of course, when you deploy mobile money, there are a set of criteria that you need to tick before you actually engage. So are those criteria fulfilled? Are there, for example, financial institutions? Are there sufficient agent networks? Is there a network platform? Are people used to the services? Do they have mobile phone ownership? I mean, there are a number of requirements that you'll have to look into before you say this is the best access channel to go for. But so in the end, I would say it depends. We'll have to do an assessment. Over. If colleagues want to add, I would encourage you.
Hi, Vince. Yeah, I see your hands up. Do go ahead.
Yeah, one of the things I will mention that what we have been very successful. When we came to Ethiopia, we heard from some NGOs that one of the smart things they did, they trained the people. At that time, HIV was a big issue. So what they were doing, they were training people inside of the how do you call it? Inside of the villages, and these people had like a limited time. They trained them for 15 days. They will work for 3 months. So we have done the same in a lot of spaces. So we started to have our local ambassadors. The banks start to have a local ambassador. But it doesn't mean that when it's over, that person doesn't continue to be the one who is telling the population how they can open an account, how they can handle their account. So by having trained local resources, that has helped us a lot for the literacy. Over.
Yeah, so I have also a bit of comment here. I think I should say that our experience is that we have received a lot of warm reception from the country in terms of introducing this technology for humanitarian payments from MBER perspective. So I can say, for instance, that MBER is becoming a household brand in rural Ethiopia. You know, MFI is providing this, technology, resolving much of the financial payment issues for the poor farmers, and it is only 5 years, as we can see, but a lot of quite progress in terms of awareing them, bringing them up to date. But we should say that as we're taking 90% of the current cash transfer program in the country, largely it's really very, very welcome from the recipient's point of view for us.
Great, and thank you both for those additions. Really, really helpful and interesting. Vince, I think the next sort of small set of questions are for you. So I'll just read a couple out and we can dive into them and then see how we go time-wise as well. So question from Fir about your customer requirements that again have been mentioned in a couple of the presentations. Do you use LMMS or Red Rose as platforms to transfer through Belcash? So how do those other platforms work, if at all, with Belcash, particularly relating to know your customer? And then the other question that I'll put to you for the moment is specifically about the fresh food program example. And do food and other vendors accept mobile money from the participants, or only the cash out at agents, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so we do not use LMMEs. We have our proprietary, we developed our own platform. It took us close to 10 years. So definitively, we have a in-house built platform. When it comes to the fresh food program, no, it was not difficult at all we had to identify them. That could have been the difficult part. But to make them accept mobile money was not difficult. The reason was that the bank mainly told them, we will come every Tuesday or every Wednesday and we will send somebody with cash, and then you can transfer your mobile cash to the teller. So doing that 1 or 2 times had created confidence at the level of these vendors. So we had no special issues at that level. Other question? Scott, I think your microphone is...
Yeah, thank you. Great. Yeah, we've got a couple more for you. So one from Circular Care. So how would you describe the coverage of HelloCash, particularly in remote areas? You know, thinking about sort of the regions or areas where humanitarian beneficiaries generally are. And then another one from Phil, asking about sort of the outcomes and impact. Have you seen anything in terms of increased purchase power or better consumption based on digital transfers compared to cash?
Yeah, so when we started, we didn't came specially for humanitarian purpose. It was really about mobile money. And we were very confident that Addis will be our main point. And we completely failed in Addis. Addis is overbanked somewhere. So one of the only region which was remaining, because Ember came 2 or 3 months before us, and Ember had already signed the biggest microfinance. I'm sure that Desta will not deny that. And definitively, they did it very well. But there was one region where they didn't have given so much attention at that time, which was the Somali region. And the interesting thing for us is when people came and told us go to the Somali region, we looked to the density, we looked to the coverage, and we were like, really? Do you want us to go there? And then the Mercy Corp and Somali Microfinance say, let's share the cost in 3. Mercy Corp, Somali Microfinance, and Belcash, and let's try it. And at that time, we started working with an MFI with 18 branches and close to 8,000 customers. And today they have around 250,000 HelloCash customers, and it's an incredible success story. They are moving $2.5 million daily in that region. So we thank Mercy Corp one more time to bring it there. And since that day, we decided that we should be really busy with the inside of the country where there is no infrastructure. We tried another experience like that in Gambela. We are still working on it. That one is less successful, but definitively our coverage is nationwide. And we try to be as much present in the areas where there is no infrastructure. So that may answer your question. So when I say we, let's be clear, we talk about the banks we work with. It's not us as Belcash itself. Do we have some elements of outcomes? I would say that we have more elements of outcomes since we have implemented Hello Solar, because that's a combination. For us, what's very important is to build a trilogy in terms of energy, connectivity, and payments. And then with Hello Market, we try to make sure that we give an access to the market. But that's something new. So the results we have today cannot be considered as valuable enough in terms of numbers to come to final conclusions. I think there was another question, if I don't make a mistake. Yeah, maybe later. I don't want to monopolize
Do go ahead if you've got the questions in front of you. That's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
Just read it out so everyone knows.
Question, which was interesting, but it's not really in a cash disbursement the way it was a little project we had about people who are seasonal workers. And these people are working in sugar canes. So mainly one of the big issues is most of them, when they go to the sugarcane farms, there is a lot of distractions and they come back with very little money. So we had a project where mainly we made sure that 50% of the income that they made was immediately sent back to their wife, which was staying in that case, we are absolutely convinced that it has helped these families to put some money on the side. So that is one of the great experience that we have been, even if it was not a big group of people, but we really enjoyed the time we had in that specific project. Over.
Great, thanks, Vince. And great to hear more about your sort of current coverage and ambitions going forward, as well as some of those different outcomes. And as we go forward, we'll sort of continue to partner and learn about the different outcomes, because I think that's an area that we're all currently exploring. Okay.
Yeah, so maybe one thing I forget to mention, Josephine. So actually, we are working on a project to have, we are starting building in every woreda. There is 850 woredas. So we are building on 200 square meters, a digital hub, which is at the same time a bank. It is, how do you call it? A bank. It's an e-commerce platform. There is a social area also. And under that, we are building a franchise model for 15,000 locations. So that is our expansion plan.
Great. Thank you. I will move on now just in the interest of time. So the next set of questions are for Desta. And again, Desta, if you wanted to open by speaking a bit about MBIR's coverage or touching on any of the other questions, that's absolutely fine. But specifically the questions that I've got here for you, going back to how do you engage illiterate and most vulnerable groups? So if there's anything additional to add there, but we've covered that a little bit already. And then from Peter at the British Red Cross, could you tell us a little bit about the innovative financial literacy functionalities? Just a bit more detail on that would be great. Thanks, Desta.
Thanks. So in terms of coverage, I think at the moment we're really pretty much good coverage addressing the humanitarian payments because we're covering all the Tigray regions, the Amhara region, the Oromia region, and we are also covering southern nations. So, so as I mentioned earlier, over more than 1 million accounts only for humanitarian transfers at the moment provided through these financial institutions. And it is a progressive story. I mean, these numbers are not started just in the first year. I mean, we are now fourth year, but as I mentioned earlier in the slides, it's like a scalable. The financial institutions are really progressing. I mean, as much as they can, as much as the government wants them to cover in the payment, and the development partners want them to act. So in terms of for instance, on the statistics, I have tried to show, the gender aspect, how many accounts are operated by women, how many of them are operated by men. So this has a really very good implication to also, gender roles as well. So I should say, there is much more empowerment for women coming up in this initiative as well. But there are some specific researches we have got from some studies conducted by different people that shows that women are getting financial literacy, and they are really saving time, and of course getting control of the money through this digital, transfer process. So it has really a role to play to also empower gender in the process. So when it comes to literacy, so I think the first challenge we had in the process is that, balancing the need of the humanitarian transfer plus also addressing the financial inclusion in the same infrastructure. So, the first aim is just to enable the transfer on the first spot. But, eventually also, help beneficiaries use other packages on the accounts, using the transfers, savings, and so on. So I think at the moment you can see that the rural Ethiopia is really changing fast, using social media, so these modern devices. And when I say innovative way of financial literacy, it's just making it impressive to the beneficiaries, that make it simple for them to learn and to get through the steps. That needs much more effort and resource as well, and of course societies. But it's not difficult to finally bring them to the awareness. And these devices are already there. I mean, in the village with few people, but how that can be used to actually, literate them for the financial service. So this is something that we are actually looking at it differently, because there is special linkage between MFI's branches and their agents, the rural financial institutions, cooperatives, RUSACOs, and there is a special relation in terms of giving them loan, accessing their socioeconomic conditions, But this initiative actually is increasing the relationship between these financial institutions and also these humanitarian beneficiaries, and of course giving them more chance to learn how they can actually, educate them finally to modern financial products and modern financial services. So these are the issues. So one more the questions I can also add on is that data management. Data management, absolutely, as I mentioned, the standardization is one of the outcome of this initiative. But when I say data management, it really avoids lots of duplications in a manual process, lots of registers and of course KYC problems, because everybody has to qualify full KYC requirements before they being given digital account in the humanitarian transfer, and the system won't allow duplicate registration, won't allow it's really very helpful for those who are paying in avoiding duplication, in having accurate data of the beneficiary, and of course in actually exactly having control over who is getting paid, and in having auditable platform for them, as mentioned by Teddy earlier. So the data management is really quite improving, and which I really see as well will improve a lot in the future in contributing learnings for like how it affects on the way the people use money earlier and now, how it affects gender issues and so on. So this data drives a lot of things, policy and even financial services that are required in the rural areas, how the people get along with that. So it's really very much improving in terms of data management, and the initiative is really, really great in our observation.
Great, thanks. It's so interesting to hear about not just the work that you're doing in terms of increasing financial literacy and inclusion, but also the results that we're already seeing. And I think it's so easy in a humanitarian crisis, when you've got the rush and the pressure to get things through as quickly as possible, to come up with solutions and not realize that it's not necessarily a solution if people don't have phones or don't understand sort of mobile money and have that level of financial literacy. So it's great to hear the work that's being done there, and that that the long-term outcomes and benefits. I just wanted to ask a question before we move on to the other ones, as you kind of touched upon it, moving towards the digital data management. I know from experience, when you go from moving to paper systems to digital systems, that can be challenging in and of itself. And I just wondered if you'd had any challenges with partners or others or internally in trying to convince that the digital system is auditable, that it is sort of reliable, and you don't need to keep the paper copy. I know there's stories of people moving to digital systems, but people still printing out all of the documents for the audit trail. So I just wondered if you had any thoughts or reflections on that.
Yeah, that's really a quite interesting question, I should say. Yeah, not only in humanitarian transfer, of course, in all digital finance initiatives you see of course, in Ethiopia particularly more, maybe I don't know about the rest of the African countries, but there is a belief of the paperwork and the digital, but I think at the moment this awareness is growing in the country. The way you see in directives that the electronic receipt is being accepted from the regulatory perspective, and you can also see people obviously don't have much belief in these electronic evidences initially, but as they know, as they move on, as they see that traceable, auditable, I think it's something that progressively improve. So at the initial level, this data transfer, as I mentioned in the challenge, especially from the database, is quite flexible in humanitarian design. For instance, if we take PSNP, there are lots of administrative decisions being taken to change how things work at the operational level, on the ground. But the financial institutions can't accept that flexibility, changing things for KYC, changing things for account management and so on. So actually working on them to actually have a standard, working on even the program database to have kind of, very good work on standardizing things there before they come to financial sector, services systems. So this is, I think, very, very difficult, challenge at the initial level, especially I should speak from MPO perspective where we have started first, but we have worked well on that to actually progress much, quickly than the rest of the providers probably, over these few years of effort.
Yeah, I will maybe add something. So there has been also a kind of improvement in that. I think it's both sides. I think I could also mention that for Amber. So initially, it was very clear that people had to fulfill paperwork, and with that paperwork, so the data were on paperwork, and then they were brought to the bank. And we, in the beginning, we were extremely skeptical about how the hell is the bank gonna receive all that paperwork. But the interesting thing is the commercial side of it. To pay the merchant for the KYC, the banks decided that we only pay them when we receive the document. And because of that, the merchant started to bring the agent started to bring the document to the bank. And then the bank started to control and say, we don't pay you because these documents are not completed. There is missing the signature or whatever. And you have also people who just sign with an X, who doesn't know really how to sign. So that could be a little bit complicated. But now with the way the regulation has given more flexibility, and the fact that internet now has a very, very good coverage, nearly 90% of the country. So more and more of the agents start to have a smartphone and can take a picture directly. And then it goes immediately to the database, and it's immediately linked to the account of the consumer. Over.
Great, thanks. Really interesting insights. Isaac, I see you've come off mute, so I'll let you jump in.
Yeah, no, just a gentle reminder that we now have, give or take, 6 minutes for Q&A.
6 minutes for Q&A, thank you.
Yeah,
in that case, I will move along swiftly to the next. So the next one I've got for Theodoros Kavede. So this is again relating to, so I've got two relating to the elements of outcomes impact and increasing purchase power, and then relating to the data. So what we were just talking about, really the data management aspects of the project, how were the registrations carried out, where was the KYC data stored, and any lessons learned for duplications, data security, and the reconciliation between systems. But do you feel also if you'd like to touch on any of the other points within the 6 minutes that we have left? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I'll just start with the registration process. So specifically for the PSNP program, the program performs its own set of targeting or identification of beneficiaries. So based on the criteria set, the beneficiaries are identified by the government, which is implementing, and also its partners. And then data is collected, the basic data is collected and is already available at the government level. We use an application which we call RPAS, which is used to store the basic profile of the beneficiaries. This beneficiary data is then transferred to the financial service provider, who will use the same data sets to open a bank account. So that serves basically as KYC information, so in compliance with the regulation. So once the data is shared, the financial service provider will upload into the system, generate accounts, and also will issue them a PIN code to be used for each beneficiary. Also, the beneficiaries have their own program ID, or what we call PSNP card, which is used, which has a picture on it, also as a form of identification at the time of doing payments. So yeah, so this is the process, and the data is also, of course, hosted. Currently, we are moving to a program MIS, which will be a central database of all program data. But at this moment, we had a desktop version of the application, which is at the each warada level. We will have the list of the beneficiaries profiles along with the details. And similarly, the banks will also have, or the microfinances in this case, will have their own copy of the data, including the transaction informations. And with regards to the reconciliation, so what happens is payroll is prepared by the implementer and then will be sent to the MFI, who will then process that payroll in terms of crediting the accounts of the beneficiaries. And once the account is credited, the report is generated from the service provider and provided to the implementing body or the government, which then reconciles it with its own program management system. So in the past, this process of exchanging data used to happen through emails or using USB flash, but we are hoping in the coming years using the MI system-to-system integration, so that all the data flow in the reconciliation and the reporting would happen in real time and also without requiring manual interventions. Looking at the of the using e-payments, so like I mentioned earlier, we have had significant impact in terms of cost, whereby fixed costs has been also reduced. In some cases also, because we are at the start of the program, there are some costs that have to be investments that happen at the first phase. So I think we will be able to recoup those investments in the long term, making the program more efficient in the long term. We have had some challenges in terms of getting the impact that we needed in terms of efficient speed, whereby
Jesse, I think Teddy has been having some issue with his connectivity, so
Yeah.
maybe we could have him drop a line to us, and then we circulate to the presenter with the ranks of the answer to the questions.
Yeah, that sounds like a good solution. And with that, I've just seen the time, so I'll, before handing back over to you, Isaac, I just wanted to say a massive thank you to all of the presenters, to GSMA, Isaac, Teddy, thank you all so much, and to the attendees. It's been a really interesting webinar, and I hope everyone's found it helpful. Isaac, over to you.
Thank you, Josie. And then just to echo on that, thank you to all our presenters, Belinda, Teddy Asefa, Vince, Desta, and Teddy Teso. We've already received some great feedback. The participants have really found it extremely useful, and more questions I'm sure will be coming. When those comes to us behind the scene, we'll be forwarding them to you. And if any of them would like to connect with you directly, especially humanitarian partners, we'll be making those links for you. This webinar has been recorded, and you'll receive the link to the recording. Everyone who signed for the webinar, including those who could not attend today, they will receive a link to this recording by Monday before end of the day next week. So thank you all for coming. It's been really a pleasure. We'll have some internal discussion between ourselves and the CCD team to see whether, call it a Q&A dedicated sessions could be organized maybe in the coming months or weeks, so that maybe those who could not make it could also have their questions answered by our tech partners in Ethiopia itself. So many thanks, and I wish you all a wonderful remaining of your day. Thank you. Bye-bye now.
Thank you very much for the initiative. Bye.
Bye.